They drove in silence for the next 15 minutes while Alice racked her brains about the surprise. She was pretty sure it was about her birthday, but would it be disappointing if there wasn't a party? Besides, where was everybody else? Blanche slowed at an unmarked dirt road and turned in. It was deeply rutted and overgrown. Long grass grew in the middle, and alders scratched the side of the Subaru. It was obvious it wasn't used much, but as they neared the end, it opened onto a bluff overlooking a beautiful rock beach. It was high tide, and the water sparkled in the warm summer sun. "Wow," thought Alice, "what a beautiful spot. Where are we?" "You'll see." Blanche pulled over and stopped the car. "Okay, from here we've got to walk." Off to the side was a broken, rusted gate, and beyond that what must have been a lane at one time, but so overgrown it was hardly visible. Blanche lifted and pushed the gate open part way, and they squeezed through. Tangles of alder and twisted apple trees closed in on the narrow path. After about 5 minutes, they came in sight of a clearing of tall grass. On a rise in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by rose bushes and painted a light green, was a small cottage with a porch. The place was completely private. There were no signs that anyone had been around for a long time. "What do you think?" Alice didn't know what to think. "Whose is it?" Blanche looked at her astonished. "It's mine, you idiot." "Yours, but—" "Come on, I'll show you around. Look at the view." They walked up the steps to the porch and gazed at the expanse of water. Off in the distance were the islands of the Passamaquoddy, and from where Alice stood, she could see Bocabec Mountain and the shores of St. Andrews. She turned her face to the breezes coming off the water and breathed in the salt air, and looked questioning at Blanche. "After your grandfather died, we were all left a little money from his estate. I knew that someday the big house would sell, and like you, I wanted a place to come back to. A place we could all come back to. Josie and I talked about it, but we hid it from everyone, especially you, until I was sure I got it. They accepted my offer yesterday." "So that's what all the phone calls and whispering was about." Alice was a bit in shock. Blanche held up the key to the front door. "Let's go in, shall we?" The door opened to a living room painted a pale yellow. Large windows faced the water and let in abundant sunshine. There were a few pieces of furniture, a rocking chair, a beat-up sofa with a coffee table in front of it, and a stand-up lamp that tilted slightly. Blanche led her to the 2 bedrooms off the living room. They were a decent size and had windows that also looked out on the water. Some tattered lace curtains still hung in them. One had a single cot with a worn quilt that mice seemed to have enjoyed. The floor sloped a bit. It was dusty and unused, but it had a real homey feel to it. "Just needs a little TLC. Picture it with a couple of beds in each room. A fold-out sofa in the living room. Some big comfy chairs. I'm thinking of building an addition to accommodate everyone." Blanche opened the door to a small bathroom. "Check this out. No outhouse. Flush toilet. And there's hot water," Blanche said proudly. She led her back to the living room and into the adjoining kitchen. There were plenty of cupboards and counter space with a turquoise fridge and a stove dated back to 1960. A wooden kitchen table stood in the middle of the room. On top of it was something large and square, covered with a checked cloth. Blanche nudged her. "Go have a look." Puzzled, Alice lifted the cloth. Her eyes widened and her face lit up with joy. "Oh, Blanche! Wow! That's just the best! Thank you!" Alice pulled the cover off completely to reveal the glass case with the stuffed animals and butterflies. "It was sure hard to get it all smuggled out without you noticing. It can stay here so Josie won't have a conniption. She said she could tolerate it here. Come on, let's go explore. It's got nearly 3 acres. Blanche led her down a trail through the mossy woods scattered with sunlight to a little cove with a small crescent beach. "There's room for a bonfire even when the tides are up, and we could have a little dinghy to row around the islands with. There's lots of shorebirds, ospreys, eagles, herons." Alice took it all in as she strolled the shoreline. She listened to Blanche's plans on decorating the place. Blanche's phone buzzed and she glanced at it briefly. "Okay, let's head back." As they neared the cottage, Alice could hear voices and laughter, and there, sitting on the porch, pointing at places off in the distance, was the rest of the family. "Wow!" exclaimed Percy. "This is primo! What a totally awesome place!" "Good thing you drew that map," said Josie. "It wasn't easy to find." "Looks like we'll have a place to come back to next year after all, eh, Alice?" Her father grinned at her and winked. Even Delia was impressed. Everyone talked at once, asking questions, giving suggestions, and checking out the surrounding area. After about an hour, Josie interrupted the chatter. "I hate to be a party pooper, but we probably should get back to the house. It needs a last look over." Flushed with happiness, they all trooped back to their cars, still talking. Blanche and Alice drove back together, and Blanche surprised her with another plan she was making. "I'm moving back east." "What? Where will you live?" "Well, at the cottage. I'll get it winterized and I can work from home. I've been thinking about it for a while." "But what about us traveling back together in the summers?" "Oh, we'll work something out. You could fly down and I'd pick you up. Besides, you might have other things to do. You never know what the future holds. At some point, you'll be making plans to go to college. Have you given any thought to what you might like to be later on in life?" This was something that Alice really hadn't considered. There was a lot to think about. It was exhilarating. For the first time since her grandfather died, Alice felt like she was looking towards the future instead of looking back at the past. It was a good feeling. Blanche had been right. Things change, but it wasn't always bad when they did. It was hard getting back to reality once they returned to the house. After the excitement of the cottage, everyone just wanted to relax. Josie corralled them in the kitchen for the final instructions. They sat around on what was left of the kitchen chairs or leaned against the wall. Delia looked bored. Percy was writing everything down. Edmund kept disappearing from the room. Blanche and Alice tried to be attentive. Coming to the end of it, they all had mixed feelings. The auctioneers were on their way. Josie clapped her hands. "Okay, folks, listen up. Here's the plan. The auctioneers come tomorrow morning, so we're all going to stay at the Pines Motel tonight. In the morning, we'll do a quick look through the house and then pack up the cars and head out of town. Edmund is going to stay until after the auction to settle up and give the keys to the new owners. How's that sound?" "Sounds perfect," said her husband, and everyone nodded their heads and congratulated Josie on her organizational capabilities. "Three cheers for Josie!" shouted Percy, and they all joined in with "Hip, hip, hooray!" which caused Josie to blush a bit with pride at being appreciated. She held up her hands. "Okay, thank you, everyone. Take a look around to make sure you got everything you wanted to take and pack up with your suitcases. We'll head over to the motel in a couple of hours." Alice went up the back stairs for her suitcase. She observed her nearly empty bedroom. Just the roll-out bed and rickety side table remained. From the window, she could see the long back field that rolled down to the water. The trees were just starting to get a tinge of yellow. Goldenrod fringed the edge of the property. It was the beginning of the end of summer. What will next year bring, she wondered. She'd be starting high school soon, which was pretty exciting, and tomorrow she'd be 13. She wouldn't be like Delia, but who would she be? What did she want to do? She never even considered these questions. So many changes. It was a bit overwhelming, but in a good way. She turned and went back down the stairs with her suitcase. Everyone had their bags and whatever treasures they were taking. It looked like Antiques Roadshow on safari. Backpacks, suitcases, plastic bags, and cardboard boxes. They started loading up the 3 vehicles. Josie hovered over everyone, giving instructions. "Make sure you have your overnight bags so you can get at them. We can't unpack everything. We'll head over to the hotel and have dinner. Delia, you drive with me, Alice with Blanche, and Percy with your father. We'll share the rooms in that order, then we'll have supper. I don't want to hear any complaints." This last was directed at Delia, who was already getting in a snit because she wanted her own room. The Pines Motel was just on the edge of town, with simple but comfortable rooms and a popular restaurant. Josie went in to register and came out with 3 keys. She gave Blanche a look of woe as Delia took the key and marched off to the room she would share with her mother. "I just hope I survive the night," she whispered to Blanche. Blanche nodded sympathetically. "You're very brave." "I'm a mother. It's a thankless task." Alice took the key and hugged her mother. "Thanks for putting me and Blanche together." Josie kissed her cheek and smiled. "Don't worry, I might call in a favor someday." The Pines served very respectable meals of generous proportions, and Josie had reserved a table for the 6 of them. While they ate, they talked excitedly about the cottage. "Let's paint it yellow. The addition needs to have big windows and an upstairs. It should be winterized. Where's all the money to do this coming from?" They asked Percy about his plans for the future as an architect, and did he think he'd like Halifax. Delia talked about how glad she was this was her last year in high school. Alice was thrilled with the prospects of returning to New Brunswick next summer and hanging out at Blanche's cottage. Blanche told them of her plans of moving back east, which was a huge surprise, but no one thought it was a bad idea. They talked about everything but the house. That would have brought a different tone to what had finally become a cheerful conversation. The meal finished, they all retired to their rooms for the night. Alice turned on the TV as Blanche arranged a few things in the bathroom, and they settled down to watch an episode of Downton Abbey they'd already seen. "Kind of reminds me of the house a bit," remarked Alice. "Maybe not quite so grand, but you know, old with all kinds of stuff in it." Blanche agreed. "Yeah, it's kind of the end of an era. No one wants the old china or linens. In a way, it's a way of life that is part of history now. Thank God for the Harrisons. They want to run a bed and breakfast, and they're young enough to manage the place." Alice nodded in agreement. "And Janie and Becky will have fun playing hide and seek with their friends." Blanche looked over and thought how much Alice seemed to have grown this summer. She was becoming a young lady, not a kid anymore. "Sweet dreams, kiddo." Blanche switched off the TV and turned off the light. "Night-night." "Sleep tight." Then together, "Don't let the bed bugs bite." Alice turned over to sleep, wondering if maybe Blanche was going to get a cake. She was really, really hoping that there would be something arranged for her birthday. She was puzzled. No one had mentioned the important upcoming event. Then again, perhaps the cottage was her birthday present. Once more, she felt greedy and selfish. Wasn't the cottage and the glass case with the birds in enough? But there'd been no cake or cards. No one had sung happy birthday. Oh God, maybe it was happening. Tomorrow she would be a teenager, and she was already turning into Delia. Well, she wasn't going to mention it. The cottage was fantastic, and the glass case with the dead animals in it was pretty awesome. She didn't want to appear ungrateful. Still, tomorrow was her birthday, and no one had said a thing. She was going to be a teenager, for heaven's sakes. It was important. With that thought, her eyes closed. She slept soundly until Blanche woke her. "Come on, get dressed." Alice squinted at the clock. It was only 7. "Come on, sleepyhead. Pitter-patter, let's get at her. Quick bite to eat, then we'll meet at the house and arrange the baggage." Alice yawned, stretched, and sat up in bed to see herself in the mirror on the dresser. She raked her fingers through her hair and patted down some of the stray strands looping out at odd angles, then got up to start the day. Her birthday. Alice remained hopeful. Blanche had got some English muffins with scrambled eggs to go. They ate them in the car, got their bags from the room, and headed back to the house for a last look. When they got there, Delia and Percy were already sorting out the luggage. Josie and Delia would drop Percy off at St. John Airport to catch his flight to Halifax, then take the Trans-Canada back home. Edmund would stay with Morris another day to settle up after the auction. He'd meet with the Harrisons, give them the keys, and answer any more questions they might have to ensure an easy transition into their new home. Blanche and Alice would travel together and take the stateside route, going across the border at St. Stephen and Calais. Blanche went over to speak with Josie and Edmund. But when Alice approached them, they stopped abruptly, and Josie turned to her. "Alice, dear, why don't you do a walk through the house one last time? Take a few minutes for yourself, but don't be long. They'll be moving stuff out for the auction soon." Josie nodded in the direction of the big burly men with tattoos who were preparing to bring the heavy items out for viewing. "Yeah, I'd like that," said Alice. She went up the steps and paused at the front door. It was open. She looked left into the study with its lovely fireplace. All the photos and paintings were gone. She walked into the dining room where the tattooed men were rolling up the carpet. She paused by the tables with their displays of china and knickknacks. She peeked into the parlor. Bare walls, the sofas and chairs pushed to the side. She ran up the stairs and whispered goodbye to all the bedrooms. Then finally down the back hall to the addition and her little room with the sunflower wallpaper. She stood in the middle of it and slowly turned in a circle. It would soon be somebody else's room. Maybe Janie would sleep here, and like herself, enjoy being undisturbed by the comings and goings of her family. She opened the closet for a last look. Only a broken badminton racket leaned in the corner. A small spider was spinning a web on the top shelf. Alice watched it pensively for a bit when something caught her eye back in the shadows. It was a crumpled old brown paper bag. "That's funny," she thought. "I don't remember seeing that." She was positive she'd cleared that closet out. She picked up the badminton racket and used it to nudge the bag over to where she could push it off the shelf. It dropped with a crunch, and she sneezed from the dust that flew off. There was a faint smell of tobacco.